if you're watching this at night, you need to know what's out here. The Mojave isn't just a stretch of empty sand and sun-bleached bones. It's a living thing, and it remembers every drop of blood spilled on its ground. My name is Sheriff Cole Ramirez, and I've spent the last 12 years patrolling these endless miles of desert. I've seen things out here that would make a city cop quit before his first coffee break. Out here, the wind doesn't just howl, it whispers warnings. The shadows don't just hide coyotes, they hide things older and hungrier than any animal. Most folks think the desert is empty, but that's only because they haven't stayed long enough to see what moves after dark. There are 7 rules for surviving the Mojave, and every one of them is written in blood. I didn't believe them at first, either. I thought they were just stories told by old-timers to scare rookies. But the first time I broke a rule, I learned the hard way that the desert doesn't forgive mistakes. If you're the kind of person who thinks rules are made to be broken, you won't last a week out here. If you're smart, you'll listen. If you're lucky, you'll remember. And if you're still here by sunrise, maybe you'll understand why I never patrol alone after midnight, why I never answer a voice calling my name from the dunes, and why I keep a list of names in my pocket, names of those who didn't listen. This is my story, but it could be yours. It was just past 9 p.m. when the radio crackled to life, the static louder than usual in the dry desert air. I was finishing paperwork in my office, the kind of mindless reports that make you forget you're the only law for 50 miles in any direction. Dispatch's voice came through, tight and uncertain. "Sheriff Ramirez, we've got a call from the Old Miller gas station off Route 66. The owner says a hiker stumbled in, covered in blood, talking nonsense about something chasing him in the dunes. Says he won't go outside, not even with the lights on." I felt a chill, the kind that doesn't come from the air conditioning. The Miller station had been the site of more than one tragedy. 2 years back, a family's car broke down there after dark. By morning, only the father was left, and he never spoke again. I grabbed my hat and keys, the weight of the badge suddenly heavier. The drive out was routine, headlights cutting through the darkness, radio playing old country songs. But the further I got from town, the more the desert pressed in, swallowing the road and the sky. I passed the old Joshua tree where Deputy Harris found those strange tracks last summer. Tracks that started as boot prints and ended as something with claws. I told myself it was just a coyote, but I never really believed it. When I pulled up to the gas station, the neon sign flickered, painting the sand in sickly green and red. The owner, Miller himself, stood at the door, eyes wide and face pale. "He's inside, Sheriff. Locked himself in the bathroom. Keeps saying not to let the wind in." I nodded, feeling the old dread settle in my gut. This was supposed to be a simple welfare check, the kind of thing you write up and forget. But the desert has a way of turning routine into nightmare. As I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy, as if the night was holding its breath. That's when I knew. Something was waiting, and it had already chosen its next story. Most towns have laws. Out here, we have rules, 7 of them, passed down from sheriff to deputy, from old-timers to anyone stubborn enough to stay. They're not written in any manual, but every local knows them by heart. I learned them my first week on the job, sitting across from Deputy Maeve, her face lined by sun and secrets. She slid a battered notebook across the table. "Read these, Cole. Don't laugh. Don't ask questions. Just remember. Rule 1. Never patrol alone after midnight. Maeve's voice echoed in my memory. The desert changes after dark. You might see headlights in the distance, but they never get closer. If you're alone, you're a target. I thought she was superstitious, until the night I saw a second set of taillights in my rear view, matching my every turn, vanishing when I stopped. Rule 2. Don't answer voices calling your name from the dunes. No matter how much they sound like your mother, your wife, or your own voice, don't answer. They want you to step off the road. I remembered the night I heard my father's voice. Even though he'd been dead for years, I almost followed it, but Maeve grabbed my arm just in time. Rule 3. Never pick up anything left in the sand after sunset. Coins, jewelry, even a lost badge. Leave it. It's not yours anymore. I once found a silver locket glinting in the moonlight. I left it, but Rookie Deputy Ellis didn't. He was gone by morning, his footprints circling the spot until they simply stopped. Rule 4. If you see a coyote standing still and watching, don't break eye contact. Back away slowly. Never turn your back. I'd seen it myself. Amber eyes, too intelligent, too patient. Rule 5. Don't whistle, not even to yourself. It calls things you don't want to meet. The wind carries sound for miles, and sometimes it brings something back. Rule 6. If you find blood in the sand, don't follow the trail. It never leads to living. Rule 7. Always keep a name in your pocket. It's for the desert to take, if it comes for you. Better a name than your soul. Break a rule and the desert remembers. I've seen what happens. I've written the reports, and I've added names to the list. The gas station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, jittery shadows across the linoleum. I could hear the hikers' ragged breathing behind the locked bathroom door, each gasp echoing off the tile. Miller hovered near the counter, wringing his hands, eyes darting to the windows as if expecting something to peer in. I knocked gently. "This is Sheriff Ramirez. You're safe. Open the door." Silence, then a shuddering voice. "Don't let it in. Please, don't let the wind in." I tried the handle. Locked. "What happened out there?" I asked, keeping my tone steady the way they teach you in the academy. The man's reply was a whisper, barely audible. I broke a rule. I picked up a coin. It was just lying there, shining in the moonlight. I thought it was lucky. My stomach tightened. Rule 3. I glanced at Miller, who shook his head, mouthing, "Don't push him." I crouched by the door, lowering my voice. "What did you see?" The hiker's breath hitched. "It followed me. I heard my mother calling from the dunes, but she's been dead for 10 years. I ran. The wind chased me. It's still out there." I felt the old fear, the one that creeps in when training fails and instinct takes over. I remembered my first year, when I'd laughed at the rules, until I saw headlights in the distance that never got closer, until I heard my own voice echoing from the sand. A sudden gust rattled the windows, and the lights flickered. Miller jumped, nearly dropping his keys. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and dust. I stepped to the window, peering out into the night. The desert was empty, but the darkness felt alive, pressing against the glass. In the distance, a coyote stood on the edge of the lot, perfectly still, eyes reflecting the neon. Rule 4. I stared back, heart pounding, refusing to blink. The hiker whimpered, It's here. I can feel it. The coyote didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched. I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact, my hand instinctively reaching for the list of names in my pocket. The wind picked up, carrying a sound that wasn't quite a whistle, wasn't quite a voice. It called my name, soft and pleading, from somewhere beyond the pumps. I swallowed hard, every lesson and protocol warring with the urge to run. Stay inside, I told Miller. Lock the doors. Don't answer if anyone calls your name. He nodded, pale and shaking. I pressed my back to the wall, eyes fixed on the coyote, the rules echoing in my mind. The wind howled, the lights flickered again, and the coyote finally turned, melting into the darkness. I exhaled, but the relief was short-lived. From the bathroom, the hiker screamed, a sound of pure terror, cut off as if swallowed by the night. I rushed to the door, pounding, shouting his name, but all I heard was the wind and the faint, mocking echo of my own voice drifting in from the desert. I forced the bathroom door open with my shoulder, splintering the cheap wood. The hiker was gone. No blood, no broken window, no sign of struggle, just a single, perfect coin resting on the tile, glinting in the harsh light. I stared at it, heart pounding, then backed away, careful not to touch it. Miller hovered in the doorway, eyes wide. "Where'd he go?" he whispered. I shook my head, unable to answer. The rules didn't explain how a man could vanish from a locked room, but the desert didn't care about explanations. I called for backup, but I already knew what the response would be. Deputy Torres arrived 20 minutes later, dust swirling around his cruiser. He was young, fresh from the academy, still clinging to the idea that every mystery had a logical answer. "You think he slipped out the window?" he asked, shining his flashlight along the frame. I pointed to the unbroken glass, the undisturbed dust on the sill. "He didn't go out that way." Torres frowned. "Then where is he?" I didn't reply. Instead, I led him outside, scanning the sand for tracks. There were none, just the wind's endless patterns, erasing everything. We canvassed the area, questioning Miller again, then the trucker who'd stopped for gas, then the old woman who ran the diner across the road. She shook her head, her eyes sharp beneath her gray hair. "You know what happened, Sheriff? He broke a rule. The desert took him." Torres rolled his eyes. "With all respect, ma'am, people don't just disappear." She fixed him with a look that could cut glass. "Not people who listen, only those who think they're smarter than the sand." Back at the station, I pulled the files, every missing person, every unexplained event, every time someone ignored the rules. The pattern was there, hidden in the margins. A lost hiker who whistled to keep his spirits up, a drifter who followed a trail of blood, a deputy who answered a voice calling from the dunes. Each case ended the same way, vanished, no trace, just a name added to the list in my pocket. Torres hovered at my shoulder, reading over my notes. "You really believe this stuff?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated. "I believe the desert doesn't play by our rules. I believe there are things out there older than any badge." He scoffed, but I saw the uncertainty in his eyes. "So what do we do? Just let people disappear?" I shook my head. "We warn them, we remember the rules, and we hope it's enough." That night, the wind rose, rattling the windows and sending dust swirling through the streets. I couldn't sleep, so I drove out to the edge of town, headlights cutting through the darkness. I parked by the old water tower, the one covered in faded graffiti and warnings. I stepped out, the sand crunching under my boots, and listened. The desert was never truly silent. There was always the wind, the distant yip of a coyote, the creak of metal in the cooling air. But tonight, there was something else, a low, rhythmic sound, like someone whistling far off in the dunes. I felt the hair on my neck stand up. I remembered Rule 5. I turned to leave, but a shape moved at the edge of my vision. A figure tall and thin, standing just beyond the reach of my headlights. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer, just the wind and that eerie, persistent whistle. I backed toward my car, keys ready, heart hammering. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. I slid behind the wheel, locked the doors, and drove back to town, the rules echoing in my mind. I'd seen enough to know that logic wouldn't save me. Only respect, caution, and the wisdom of those who'd survived before me. The desert was testing me, and I could feel it watching, waiting for me to slip. The Mojave wasn't always a place of fear for me. I grew up here, a sunburned kid with sand in my shoes and dreams of escape. My father was sheriff before me, and his father before him. I used to think the badge was a curse, a chain tying us to a place everyone else seemed desperate to leave. But my father wore it with pride, and he taught me the rules long before I understood their meaning. I remember one night when I was 12, the wind howling so hard it rattled the windows. My father sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his revolver, the radio murmuring static in the background. He looked up and saw me watching. "You hear that?" he asked. I nodded, shivering. "That's not just wind, Cole. Sometimes it carries voices. If you ever hear your name out there, you come straight home. Promise me." I promised, not realizing how serious he was. Years later, after he died, I found his notebook, pages filled with names, dates, and rules written in a steady hand. There were stories he never told me, cases he never closed. One entry stood out. "Maeve," answered a voice from the dunes. "Never found her. Left a name in my pocket that night." I realized then that the rules weren't just for rookies or tourists. They were for everyone, even the ones who thought they knew better. When I took the badge, I tried to bring change, new radios, better training, more patrols. But the desert didn't care about progress. The first time I lost someone, a young deputy named Ellis, who picked up a silver locket after sunset, I felt the weight of every name my father had written. I called his mother myself, voice shaking, unable to explain how her son could vanish without a trace. Now, every time I drive past the old Joshua tree or see the sun set over the dunes, I remember the faces of those I couldn't save. I keep their names in my pocket, just like my father did, hoping it's enough to keep the desert satisfied. This isn't just my job. It's my inheritance, my burden, and my promise. I can't leave, not while the rules still matter, not while there are people who need to be warned. The Mojave is in my blood, and every case is personal. It was just after midnight when the call came in, a frantic voice on the radio, barely coherent. "Sheriff, it's Torres. I need help. I'm at the old quarry. Something's out here. I think I broke a rule." The signal crackled, then cut out. My heart dropped. Torres was supposed to be on the south side of town, nowhere near the quarry. I grabbed my keys and sped through the empty streets, headlights bouncing over ruts and sand. The quarry was a scar in the earth, abandoned for decades, rumored to be cursed even before the rules were written. I found Torres's cruiser parked at the edge, door hanging open, engine running. The wind was fierce, carrying whispers that seemed to circle me. I called his name, but the only answer was my own voice, thrown back by the dunes. Rule 2. I gripped the list of names in my pocket, forcing myself to remember. A flashlight beam flickered in the pit below. I scrambled down, boots slipping on loose gravel. Torres stood in the center, pale and shaking, staring at something in his hand. "I found this," he said, holding up a battered sheriff's badge. "It was just lying there. I thought it was yours." Rule 3. Never pick up anything left in the sand after sunset. I reached for him, but he stepped back, eyes wide with terror. "I heard my mother calling me, Sheriff. She sounded so real. I just wanted to see her again." The wind howled, and the temperature dropped. Shadows gathered at the edge of the quarry, shapes that didn't belong to any animal I knew. Torres's radio crackled, a voice whispering his name over and over. He dropped the badge, clutching his head. "Make it stop, please." I tried to pull him away, but the sand beneath us shifted, swallowing his feet. He screamed, reaching for me, but something unseen dragged him down, leaving only swirling dust and the echo of his voice. I stumbled back, heart pounding, the rules screaming in my mind. I'd warned him. I told him the stories. But the desert doesn't care about warnings. It only cares about the rules, and tonight one had been broken. I scrambled up the quarry's edge, the wind tearing at my clothes, the shadows following. I didn't look back. Couldn't. When I reached the cruiser, the radio was still on, Torres's voice looping in static. "Don't let the wind in. Don't let the wind in." I slammed the door, locked it, and stared out into the darkness. The desert was alive, hungry, and I knew it wasn't finished. I gripped the list of names, feeling the weight of everyone I'd added. I was next unless I found a way to make it right. The Mojave had claimed another, and the night was far from over. I drove back to town with the windows up, the radio off, and the list of names clenched in my fist. Torres's voice still echoed in my mind, a warning and a plea. I knew I couldn't face this alone. The rules were clear. When the desert comes for you, you need more than a badge. You need the old ways. I parked outside the home of Mrs. Yazzie, the oldest living descendant of the first sheriff. Her porch light was already on, as if she'd been waiting. I knocked, and she opened the door without a word, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You broke a rule," she said, not as a question but as a fact. I nodded, unable to speak. She motioned me inside, where the air was thick with sage and cedar smoke. She handed me a bowl of water and a pouch of red earth. "You must return to the quarry. The desert won't be satisfied until you face what's there. But you can't go as a sheriff. You must go as a son of this land." She pressed a turquoise amulet into my palm. "This will help you see what's real. The rest is up to you." I left her house with the ritual items, the weight of tradition heavy on my shoulders. The drive back to the quarry felt different. No music, no radio, just the sound of my own breathing and the distant howl of the wind. The moon was high, casting the sand in silver and shadow. I parked at the edge, heart pounding, and stepped out, feeling the desert's gaze settle on me. I walked to the center of the quarry, the bowl of water in one hand, the pouch of earth in the other. I drew a circle in the sand, just as Mrs. Yazzie had shown me, and poured the water inside it. The air grew colder, the wind swirling around me, carrying voices, Torres, Ellis, my father, all calling my name. I gritted my teeth, refusing to answer, remembering Rule 2. I knelt in the circle, sprinkling the red earth over the water, and began to chant the words Mrs. Yazzie had taught me. They felt strange in my mouth, older than English, older than the badge. The wind screamed, and the shadows pressed closer, shapes flickering at the edge of my vision. Coyotes with human eyes, figures with no faces, the lost and the taken. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a figure rose from the sand, tall, thin, its face shifting between Torres, my father, and a stranger. Its eyes were empty, its mouth too wide. It stepped to the edge of the circle, unable to cross. "You broke the rule," it hissed, voice layered with every name I'd ever written. "You owe a debt." I held up the list of names, my hand shaking. "Take these," I said, voice barely steady. "Take the names, not the living." The entity laughed, a sound like wind through broken glass. "Names are not enough. Blood was spilled. Blood must answer." I felt the weight of every loss, every mistake, every rule broken. I thought of my father, of Torres, of all the ones I couldn't save. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own badge, the one I'd worn since the day I took the oath. I pressed it into the sand at the edge of the circle. "If you want blood, take mine, but leave the others. Let the living go." The entity paused, its form flickering. The wind died, and for a moment, the desert was silent. Then it lunged, slamming against the invisible barrier of the circle. The turquoise amulet in my hand burned cold, and I gripped it tighter, chanting louder, pouring every ounce of memory and regret into the words. The entity shrieked, recoiling, its form unraveling into sand and shadow. The voices faded, replaced by a single, low moan, the sound of the desert mourning its dead. The wind picked up, scattering the circle, erasing the ritual, and the entity was gone. I collapsed to my knees, breath ragged, the amulet still warm in my hand. The quarry was empty, the sand undisturbed except for the circle and my badge, half buried at the edge. I picked it up, feeling its weight, and whispered a prayer for Torres, for Ellis, for all the names on my list. As I climbed out of the quarry, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the desert in gold and crimson. I knew the rules would never change, and the Mojave would never truly be safe. But for now, the debt was paid, and the living were free to see another sunrise. The sun rose over the Mojave, washing the quarry and the town in pale gold. I drove back in silence, the badge heavy in my pocket, the turquoise amulet still pressed in my palm. The air felt lighter, but the weight in my chest remained. At the station, the phones were quiet, the world pretending nothing had changed. But I knew better. The desert never forgets, and neither do I. I filed the report for Torres, missing, presumed dead. There was no body, no evidence, just a cruiser left running and a name added to the list. I called his family, my voice steady but hollow, offering the same empty comfort I'd given too many times before. I told them he was brave, that he did his duty, that he was lost to something none of us could have stopped. I didn't mention the rules or the ritual or the thing that wore his face in the quarry. Some truths are too heavy to share. Mrs. Yazzie came by that afternoon, bringing bread and a quiet nod of understanding. She didn't ask for details. She just sat with me, her presence a reminder that I wasn't alone in carrying the burden. The community felt the loss, even if they didn't speak of it. People left offerings at the edge of the sand, sage, water, and a handful of coins. The old ways, a silent promise to remember. I walked the town that evening, watching the shadows stretch across the streets. The rules echoed in my mind, sharper now, each one etched by loss. I realized they weren't just warnings, they were a map, a way to survive, a way to honor those who came before. I added a new rule to my father's notebook. If you break a rule, you must make it right. The desert demands respect, not just fear. I visited the quarry one last time, standing at the edge as the wind picked up. I buried the badge in the sand, a marker for Torres, a promise to remember. I whispered the names on my list, letting the wind carry them into the dunes. The Mojave was quiet, the threat gone, for now. But I knew it would return, as it always does, testing the living, demanding payment for every mistake. Driving home, I felt the cost of survival, the loneliness, the guilt, the endless vigilance. But I also felt something else, resolve. The rules would stand, and I would keep them for myself and for everyone who called this place home. The desert had taken enough. It would take no more, not while I still had breath and memory. The Mojave is a place of beauty and danger, of secrets and scars. It writes its rules in blood, and it expects you to read them. I have, and I will never forget. Some nights, when the wind is just right, I hear the echoes of those I've lost, names whispered through the Joshua trees, laughter carried on the dust. The Mojave never lets you forget. It keeps its secrets close, but it always leaves a trail for those willing to look. I've learned to listen, to watch for the signs, to respect the rules written in blood and memory. But I also know the desert is never truly satisfied. It's always hungry, always waiting for the next soul to test its boundaries. I keep my father's notebook on my desk, the pages worn thin from years of turning. The list of names grows longer, but so does my understanding. Every case, every loss, every strange night under the stars has taught me something new about this land and about myself. I've seen things that defy explanation, shapes moving just beyond the headlights, voices that sound like home but lead you into darkness, footprints that start as human and end as something else. I've learned that survival isn't just about following the rules. It's about knowing when to trust your instincts, when to ask for help, and when to walk away. But the Mojave isn't done with me. Last week, a rancher found a trail of blood leading into a canyon that's not on any map. The night before, a child claimed to see a woman made of sand standing at the edge of her bed, whispering promises of safety if she'd just step outside. And there are rumors, always rumors, of a lost town that appears only during the hottest nights, its streets filled with shadows that remember every broken rule. If you're still listening, remember this: the desert is patient. It will wait for you to forget, to get careless, to think you're safe. That's when it strikes. So if you ever find yourself driving these roads after dark, keep your windows up, your radio low, and a name in your pocket. Don't answer voices from the dunes. Don't pick up what isn't yours. And never ever break the rules. There are more stories out here, more mysteries, more dangers, more names waiting to be written. If you want to know what happens next, if you've got your own story to share, leave a comment below. Maybe your tale will be the next one the Mojave remembers. And if you're brave enough, come back for the next case. The desert is waiting. Are you?